My name is Claire Donovan. I was 33 years old when everything I believed about loyalty, family, and love collapsed at the same time. I didn't grow up privileged. I didn't inherit connections. I built my career the American way. I showed up early, stayed late, followed the rules, and earned every stripe on my uniform. For years, I was the reliable one. The sister who covered mistakes. The daughter who carried responsibility without complaint. The officer who never cut corners. And that's why the betrayal didn't just hurt. It detonated. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you would have defended without hesitation? Someone you protected, even when they didn't deserve it? If you have, you're not alone. And if you're watching this right now, tell me where you're tuning in from. Because this story isn't just about loss. It's about what happens when dignity quietly outlives deception. 7 years earlier, I stood in front of my locker at Nellis Air Force Base, adjusting my service dress uniform for what felt like the 10th time that morning. First Lieutenant Claire Donovan. 26 years old. On track for captain. Focused. Disciplined. Certain of who I was. My father, retired Chief Master Sergeant Thomas Donovan, raised me to believe that respect wasn't demanded. It was earned through consistency. Through showing up even when no one was watching. That evening, my younger sister, Megan, arrived at the officers' club wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly uniform allowance. Megan had never been military. She didn't like the structure, the hierarchy, or the discipline. But she loved the proximity to power that came with it. Lately, she'd been showing up to more of my professional events than ever before. She called it support. I was starting to call it surveillance. "Claire, you look tense," she said, brushing imaginary lint from my sleeve. "You're engaged to a captain now. You can afford to relax." My fiancé, Ethan Walker, had made captain 6 months earlier. The promotion fit him. Maybe too well. He carried himself differently now. Straighter posture. Louder confidence. When Megan complimented his uniform that night, I watched him square his shoulders just a little more, hold her gaze just a little longer. Subtle. The kind of thing you only notice when you know someone well enough to feel the shift. "I smile when there's something worth smiling about," I said. Megan laughed. "God, you're always so disciplined. I could never date enlisted. Rank matters. You're lucky Ethan's an officer." Ethan was across the room talking to my commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan O'Connor. But I saw him glance over. Saw him notice Megan the way people notice sunlight after being indoors too long. Over the next few weeks, Megan began appearing places she had no reason to be. A change of command ceremony. A dining out event she somehow got tickets to. Each time, she gravitated toward Ethan. Each time, he allowed it. "Your sister's really interested in military life," Ethan said one night as we drove home. "Is she?" I replied. "She asks smart questions. About promotion paths. About how people move up. She's curious about status," I said. "That's different." He was quiet for a moment. "Not everyone sees the world the way you do, Claire." That tone was new. Like he was explaining something to a subordinate instead of talking to the woman he planned to marry. I told myself he was adjusting to his new rank. I told myself a lot of generous things that turned out to be excuses. The first crack became impossible to ignore during my promotion rehearsal. Megan showed up wearing jeans, a borrowed base jacket, and an officer's cap that wasn't hers. "Look," she joked, slapping on a sloppy salute. Captain Megan. The officers smiled politely. Ethan laughed. Not a quick laugh. A real one. The kind that encouraged her to keep the cap on. To keep performing. Megan, give it back, I said quietly. Relax, Claire, she replied. It's a joke. Ethan touched my arm. She's just trying to lighten the mood. You've been tense. That was the first time he sided with her over me in public. I felt it immediately. Like a pressure change before a storm. Something had shifted, and I couldn't unsee it. Megan started calling him Ethan instead of Captain Walker, even in professional settings. He never corrected her. When I brought it up, he reframed my concern as me being elitist. As me being the problem. It was skillful. And it worked. I stopped questioning myself out loud. She called him more than she called me. I noticed because phone logs mattered for security clearances. When I asked about it, he said she needed advice. About jobs. About housing. Then it became, we just get along. She understands ambition, he said once. She gets what it takes to build something. You're good at following orders, Claire. That's not the same thing. I was a top-rated officer. Leading operations he'd never even observed. But suddenly, in his version of reality, I was rigid. Replaceable. My father noticed. He always did. He talks about rank like it's identity, Dad said one afternoon after Ethan left. Pride's fine. Needing an audience is something else. The final confirmation came quietly. Ethan canceled dinner one night for inspection prep. I believed him until I ran into a colleague who mentioned seeing him at a bar off base. Megan's car was there too. I didn't confront him. I didn't need to. You don't spend your life learning situational awareness without recognizing when you're in one. The call from my commanding officer came 3 days later. Lieutenant Colonel O'Connor asked me to come to his office. Not requested. Asked. Captain Walker has reported a personal conflict, he said carefully. He's requesting to formally dissolve your engagement. He'd ended it through the chain of command before speaking to me. Turned our relationship into paperwork. Protected his career while dismantling everything else. I walked out into the Nevada heat and stood there breathing, realizing something important. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It had been rehearsed. That night, Ethan returned the ring. 3 days later, Megan posted a photo wearing it. No faces. Just the diamond. The caption read, "Upward mobility comes to those who deserve it." And in that moment, I understood. She hadn't taken him by accident. She'd taken him as proof. What happened next wasn't revenge. It was something quieter. And far more permanent. I didn't respond to Megan's post. I didn't call her. I didn't give her the reaction she was clearly starving for. I sat alone in my apartment, the ring gone, the future I'd planned suddenly erased, and I let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. Betrayal doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it slips in quietly, wearing familiar faces, asking you to doubt your own instincts. Ethan moved in with Megan 3 weeks later. I didn't hear it from them. I heard it the way everything travels on a military base, sideways, through whispers and half-confirmed facts. They didn't hide it. Why would they? They hadn't broken regulations. Just trust. They married less than a year later. Small ceremony. Immediate family only. I wasn't invited. Neither was my father. Megan sent a photo to the family group chat. Her in white. Ethan in dress blues. Both smiling like they'd accomplished something difficult. Something earned. My aunt called me that night. Are you okay, Claire? I'm fine, I said. You don't have to be. In the military, functioning counts as fine until you're allowed to fall apart. I didn't fall apart. I redirected. I threw myself into work with an intensity that made my supervisors take notice. Extra duties. Additional training. Leadership roles others avoided. I needed something solid to stand on while everything personal felt unstable. 6 months after the breakup, I made Captain right on schedule. No delays. No favors. Exactly where I should have been. My father stood at the ceremony, pride quiet but unmistakable. Megan and Ethan didn't attend. They were busy building their own narrative. Ethan made major quickly after their wedding. Not suspiciously. He was competent. Political. He understood visibility. Megan made sure everyone knew. Every social media post highlighted his rank, his importance, her proximity to it. I made major on schedule too. Megan texted, "Congrats. Maybe you'll catch up someday." I blocked her number for the first time that night. We crossed paths occasionally at official events. Megan had learned the language. The customs. The unspoken rules about rank and respect. She played the role of officer's wife flawlessly. Too flawlessly. Like someone reciting lines instead of living them. Ethan stopped making eye contact with me. Not out of shame. More like I no longer fit the version of his life he was presenting. 2 years after their wedding, our father's health began to decline. Nothing dramatic at first. Just the slow accumulation of years and stress. Appointments. Medications. Adjustments. I took leave to help him. Drove him. Managed his care. Made sure he rested. Megan called occasionally. Promised to visit. Rarely did. When she did show up, she talked about Ethan's career. About officer spouse events. About how demanding it was to support someone important. She never asked how I was managing everything. Dad noticed. He always noticed. She's living a performance, he said one afternoon in a waiting room. Performances take all your energy. There's nothing left for real things. I made major during that period. Dad attended the ceremony. Megan sent a text. Good for you. Nothing more. Ethan was promoted again ahead of schedule. Lieutenant Colonel. Megan's posts escalated. Designer dresses. Borrowed insignia. Captions about building an empire together. I stopped looking. I refused to be an audience. Then my father passed. Quietly. In his sleep. After a good day. I stood in the hospital parking lot afterward and felt clarity cut through grief. I was about to be forced into proximity with Megan again. And this time, I wouldn't shrink. Funeral planning fell to me by default. Next of kin. Megan inserted herself immediately. There are optics to consider, she said. Dad was senior enlisted. This needs to reflect that properly. She handled the arrangements. I focused on the eulogy. On honoring a man who'd lived integrity instead of advertising it. The morning of the service, I stood in my quarters adjusting my uniform. Major Claire Donovan. Calm. Centered. And not alone. There was someone in my life Megan knew nothing about. Colonel James Whitaker. 15 years older. Recently widowed. We'd met 18 months earlier during a joint task force briefing. Started talking about leadership. Never stopped. We married quietly 6 months before my father passed. No announcements. No posts. Just commitment. Dad knew. He approved instantly. "Don't let your sister make this about her," he'd said. The chapel was already full when we arrived. Megan entered later, dressed impeccably, Ethan beside her in dress blues. She wore his rank insignia as jewelry. Lieutenant Colonel silver. Borrowed status pinned to fabric. She worked the room, collecting condolences, introducing herself as Chief Donovan's daughter, married to Lieutenant Colonel Walker. Always the rank. Always the reminder. I delivered the eulogy. Steady. Personal. Honest. I spoke about service. About character. About a man who understood that respect wasn't about position. People listened. Some nodded. Some looked at Megan, then back at me. At the reception, she found me near the memory boards. Loud enough to draw attention. "Still single, Claire." She smiled. "Some of us just have better instincts." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. "Have you met my husband?" I asked calmly. Her smile froze. James stepped forward, hand at my back. Full colonel insignia unmistakable. The room went silent. Ethan stiffened automatically, offering his hand. "Colonel," he said. James shook it. Professional. Polite. Nothing more. The truth didn't need embellishment. It stood on its own. Megan didn't speak again. She left early, claiming a headache. Ethan followed. I stayed. I talked to people who'd known my father as a leader, not a symbol. 3 days later, Megan called from an unknown number. She wanted to talk. We met at a coffee shop. No makeup. No performance. "I didn't know," she said. "Would it have mattered?" I asked. She didn't answer. She talked about her marriage unraveling. About not knowing who she was outside of being someone's wife. "I can't help you," I told her. "Not because I don't care. But because I won't compete anymore." She cried. I didn't. I left. Some stories don't end in reconciliation. They end in boundaries. And boundaries, I learned, are not walls. They're doors you choose not to reopen. After that conversation, something inside me finally went quiet. Not numb. Not empty. Just settled. The kind of calm that comes when you stop waiting for someone else to validate a truth you already know. Megan tried calling twice more over the next month. I didn't answer. She sent a text saying she understood if I needed space. I didn't reply. Space wasn't something I needed. Space was something I chose. There's a difference. Life, meanwhile, kept moving forward. And for the first time in years, it felt like it was moving in the right direction without resistance. My career didn't accelerate because of who I married or who I knew. It continued because I did my job well. I commanded a training unit. I earned top evaluations. I built a reputation that stood on competence, not proximity. James understood that kind of life. We didn't need to talk about rank at home. We talked about responsibility. About how leadership follows you long after you take the uniform off. About how real partnership isn't about being impressed by each other, but about being steady for each other. A year after my father's funeral, I was selected for lieutenant colonel below the zone. Early. Earned. James didn't throw a party. He poured 2 glasses of wine, clinked his against mine, and said, "Your dad would have smiled quietly and pretended it was no big deal." That was exactly right. Megan and Ethan's marriage didn't survive. I heard it through my aunt first. Then through the base grapevine. Then finally, months later, directly from Megan herself in an email that didn't ask for anything. She wrote about therapy. About realizing she'd spent her entire life measuring herself against other people's achievements. About confusing attention with worth. She apologized without excuses. I believed her. But belief didn't mean access. I wished her well and kept my distance. Healing doesn't always require reunion. Sometimes it just requires honesty. I ran into Ethan once, years later, at a joint briefing. He was still a lieutenant colonel. Passed over again. He looked tired in a way ambition can't fix. He congratulated me on my assignment. Apologized for his choices. Told me I deserved better. I thanked him and meant it. Then I walked away without looking back. Closure doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels final. My own life expanded in ways I never imagined when I was 26 and standing in front of that locker at Nellis. I moved to a strategic planning role. Took on responsibilities that shaped outcomes instead of just executing them. I learned how much influence quiet consistency can have in rooms full of loud egos. When the promotion list came out and my name was on it, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate loudly. I sat alone for a long moment and thought about my father teaching me how to polish boots until I could see my reflection. About him telling me that discipline was doing the right thing even when no one was watching. About how he'd once said, "Character is the only thing no one can take from you." I was promoted to brigadier general with full honors. My family attended. James stood beside me, proud but never performative. Megan didn't come. She sent flowers instead, with a simple note. "Dad was right about you." I kept it. Not as a trophy. As proof that growth, even late, is still growth. Years passed. Responsibility multiplied. James made his own promotions. Our marriage held steady through long hours, heavy decisions, and the kind of pressure that exposes cracks quickly. We didn't crack. We reinforced. Megan rebuilt her life quietly. Went back to school. Started working with military families in transition. Helping people untangle identity from titles. I heard she was good at it. I wasn't surprised. Pain teaches lessons success never does. When I made Major General, 2 stars settled on my shoulders with a weight that felt earned, not heavy. I thought again of my father. Of the quiet pride he carried. Of the way he never chased attention but somehow commanded respect everywhere he went. Standing there, I understood something fully for the first time. I hadn't won because someone else lost. I hadn't succeeded because I outperformed anyone in a competition I never entered. I'd won because I stayed true when it would have been easier to harden. Because I chose substance over story. Because I refused to become smaller so others could feel taller. Some people chase rank. Some people chase status. And some people chase applause. But the people who last, the ones who lead well and live well, are the ones who chase integrity when no one is clapping. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you protected. If someone tried to rewrite your worth using their own insecurity. If you ever wondered whether staying true would cost you too much. Let this be your reminder. Truth doesn't rush. But it always arrives. If this story resonated with you, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what part hit closest to home. If you've ever had to reclaim your dignity after someone tried to take it from you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You never know who needs to hear your story next.